Hello and welcome to AgriFocus, the podcast from Agriland that looks in depth at some of the topical issues of the day. I'm Breifne O'Brien and I'm joined today by the CEO of the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, ICBF, Sean Coughlan. Cattle breeding and genetics are generating a lot of headlines currently, and we will try to touch on as many of these issues as possible during this podcast. Last week, 4 of the largest operators in Ireland's bovine artificial insemination sector confirmed they intend to introduce intellectual property or IP rights on their high genetic merit bulls and semen. Sean, what is ICBF's stance on this, and will the move have any negative implications for Irish-based pedigree cattle breeders?
Thanks, Breifne. And I suppose that particular issue has not been something that we've actually discussed at ICBF board. So we don't have a formal position on it. I mean, there is precedence there. Most of the large international breeding companies have introduced IP on their genetics, and sure, it creates challenges at different levels, and it will, and something that we'll just have to work through as an industry.
So this is something, I suppose, Sean, that has happened globally. It just hadn't happened in Ireland until now.
Yes, yeah, that's largely the case. And in fact, some of the genetics that was being sold in Ireland was subject to IP. For example, LIC had brought it in a number of years ago. Any of the genetics coming in from some of the other companies were also subject to IP. So it's not a new concept. But as I say, it's not something we've actually had a detailed discussion on at ICBF board.
Yeah, and Sean, of course, another one that has been dominating the agri headlines, I suppose, in recent weeks is several cattle breed societies have come out in the past 2 months and they've expressed no confidence in the current Eurostar indices. If these indices are here to help cattle breeders, why have we seen this happen, Sean?
I think there's a number of reasons. I think undoubtedly the change to the economic model that happened back in November of 23 is still having some repercussions. There's no doubt. And at that point in time, it was very clear in the post-COVID era that costs had risen significantly, feed costs, fertilizer costs, and beef prices had increased, but maybe not at the same pace, So one of the things, and that has definitely created a lot of frustration out there. I think one of the things that has come, and one of the things that has come out of the stakeholder forum is, we agreed that we would not wait as long again to actually update the economic values, and we have committed to updating those economic values again this summer. Dr. Paul Crosson in Teagasc is working on that at the minute. They will get updated in the summer. And I think, again, one of the areas that, will obviously get a reasonable jump, is going to be beef price, for example, because that has risen quite significantly. And I think the outlook for beef price is a lot more positive.
And are we going to see, I suppose, in these updated indices, are we going to see any major changes or noticeable changes in the weightings of the different traits in the overall composition of the indices?
So the weightings and the traits are largely driven by the economics. Now, one of the things that Teagasc did when they updated the indexes the last time was they didn't take the peak prices. So, for example, as I understand, fertilizer was running at about 950 euros a ton the last time that they were updated. I think Teagasc put in the figure at 550 euros a ton. Same with feed price. I think feed is in there at about 380 euros a ton. I don't think it's a million miles away from that right now. So I wouldn't expect to see major changes coming. I think the beef price is probably one that we could rise a bit. And looking at it, obviously, that's a very positive development. But look, as I say, that's the area of expertise of Dr. Paul Crosson in Teagasc, and that work is ongoing. And we have committed, coming out of the stakeholder forum, that those economic values will get updated this summer.
And do you think there will be a positive outcome, I suppose, for some of the maybe pedigree breed societies that have become disillusioned? Do you think that the updated indices maybe might be more appealing to some of these cattle breeds?
I would hope so. I mean, I think the reality is that I suppose the weanling trade and the beef trade has been very strong, and maybe some of the differentials there that people are seeing, they're feeling that they're not reflected in the indexes, and hopefully when we do the updated economic values, let's see where it falls out. But ultimately, we do have to go with the science and the economic values from Teagasc in relation to that.
And I suppose, Sean, with everything that's went on with the breed societies and maybe what they've been saying in recent weeks with in relation to the Eurostar indices, Do you think suckler farmers are fairly represented on the board of ICBF, or maybe should there be a separate beef board to deal with beef indices composed solely of pedigree breeders and beef industry partners?
Look, I mean, the makeup of ICBF was set up in 1998. People bought the shares then. The shareholders actually, they appoint the board members to ICBF. ICBF doesn't have control over it's a representative board. So the makeup of ICBF is set in stone, and that in terms then of engaging with beef breeders and the beef industry. Look, there's good farm organisation representation around the board. There are pedigree breeders around the board. So I don't believe that it's fair to say that pedigree breeders and beef is not well represented around the ICBF board.
And I suppose, would dairy maybe have more representation on the board or than the suckler or beef sectors?
Yeah, I mean, it probably does in the sense that the people that put up the shares originally were the AI companies, the milk recording organisations, the breed societies, and farm organisations. But the farm organisations are well represented on the beef side. AI companies serve both dairy and beef markets, and as I say, and you do have breed society representation on there as well.
And I suppose one of the complaints that we often hear about the Eurostar indices and the star ratings themselves is that suckler farmers sometimes note that their better producing cows maybe have a low rating and their poorer producing suckler cows have a high rating in the indices. Why does this happen?
It depends, Breifne, on what you consider to be your higher producing cows. So, for example, I did some analysis there over the weekend for one of the counties in the west. And it was clear that at the weanling sales, for example, the weanling price for the 1-star cows was slightly ahead of the weanling price for the 5-star cows. Okay, but when we looked at a little bit further, the 1-star cows in 2024, for every 100 1-star cows, they were producing 82 calves. For every 100 5-star cows, they were producing 96 calves. So the small differential that there was in terms of the weanling price was far outweighed by the number of calves that those cows were actually producing. So the economic model that Teagasc have takes into account lots of different factors. So just because a cow produces the highest price weanling does not mean that she is the most profitable cow if she is only producing a calf every 15 months, for example.
So I suppose what you're saying, Sean, is that if you look at it on a calf-by-calf basis, it will, I suppose, appear differently than if you look at it from a lifetime production of a cow basis.
Exactly. Or if you have 20 suckler cows, and you're weaning, say, 18 or 19 calves and getting 18 or 19 calves away to the mart versus getting 15 or 16 calves away to the mart, you need a much, much higher price on those 15 or 16 calves away to the mart in order to make up for the fact that you have 3 or 4 calves less.
And I suppose, do you think that future suckler schemes should be linked to these indices? We see that it's generated a lot of confusion surrounding SCEP. But what else do you think that can be done to resolve the current impasse between the ICBF and the breed societies?
So the two very different questions there, Breifne. So the first one is in relation to government policy. And look, the government policy is set by government, and we don't have a role in setting that. I do think that in the schemes and the money that's available for schemes and getting money out to farmers, it is going to be based on actions, and a lot of those actions are going to be geared around climate-related actions and carbon-efficient actions at the moment. I think we have a strong belief that animal production has a role to play in solving the climate challenges that we face. So that's one part. In terms of the breed societies, and look, I have reached out to a number of the breed societies. I'm very keen to engage to try and find a way forward. And look, and some of that is going to have to happen, I would say, under the radar a little bit as well. To resolve that, there's a lot of very good people in the breed societies. We're very keen to make this work, and I'm committed to doing that.
Where do you think maybe compromises can be made with, I suppose, the ICBF and with some of these breed societies? Like, I suppose, what are these people's, in these societies, what is their key demands and what are they looking to see from the ICBF?
I think one of the things is that there are, obviously there are 15 or 16 different breed societies. I think there's maybe 5 or 6 that have come out saying that they're not going to publish the stars on their catalogues at this point in time. I think there's different issues for different societies, and I think that's one of the challenges. I think, all the breeds have their strengths and weaknesses, and I think there are different issues for different societies, and we'll have to work through that.
And I suppose another one that we hear a lot from some suckler farmers and even pedigree breeders is that heavy suckler cows are being unduly penalised in the updated Eurostar indices. And I suppose often we also hear that maybe there's a concern out there, or there's a view out there that ICBF wants smaller cattle across all breeds. Is this the case? And if so, why?
So first of all, there's no issue with a big cow, but a big cow needs to produce a big weanling. So, I mean, what we're seeing is that if we have an 800 kilo cow and that cow can wean a 400 kilo calf, or you have a 700 kilo cow can wean a 400 kilo calf, well, which one do we want? We want the 700 kilo cow every time, because there is going to be, no matter what we say, there's going to be an additional feed cost associated with just maintaining an 800 kilo cow over a 700 kilo cow. I mean, the based on the weight data that we've been getting in through SCEP and so on, the current estimated weight that we see across the national herd is about 690 kilos. The current data that we have does not see that that's going to reduce anytime in the near future. And as I say, it's about having efficient cows. It's not about having big cows or small cows. It's about ensuring that they're efficient.
And I suppose that weight data, Sean, then it's not ultimately included in the overall composition of your data, is it?
So the technician weight data is coming in at this stage, and the farmer recorded data will be flowing into the system this summer. That's one of the other things. The second thing that has come from the stakeholder forum is the request to include that data. That will happen this summer. So there's ongoing work there, and that's going to be there's 4 items that are coming out of the stakeholder forum that are going to be implemented this summer. The first one we've spoken about is an update to the economic values. The second one is the inclusion of the SCEP weight data that we've just talked about. The third thing is there are some updates to be done, especially in relation to foreign data on calving difficulty, that we're going to include this summer. And the fourth thing is, so we have been working on a weanling price trait to give I suppose further credit to weanling producers, and that's going to come in. And that's in addition also to the live weight update that we already did. So those are 5 key concrete actions coming out of the stakeholder forum that we've acted on.
And Sean, weanlings that are sold for export, some farmers have said that their data is not, I suppose, incorporated into the ICBF's overall evaluations of the performance of these cows. Is that the case?
No, that's not the case. I mean, the majority of those weanlings are now going through MARTs before they go out. And once that data is captured in the MART, that data then flows into the ICBF evaluation. So I would say historically there was probably a lot more of those weanlings going out of the country that weren't going through the MARTs, but that's not the case anymore.
So I suppose when they go through the MARTs, what data is taken into account?
So you have the obviously the age of the animal, the price per kilo of the animal, and the weight of the animal. So we're able to get a very good prediction on the growth rate of the animal.
And is it an average figure then that's given to progeny performance of the suckler cows, or is it allocated on a cow by cow basis?
Well, it's allocated on a cow by cow basis. So in terms of the every cow, whatever her descendants, their performance, their individual performance is related back to that cow, and that's what determines actually what her value is going to be for weaning weight.
So cows that are continually delivering a calf with a higher price per kilo will be ranked higher than cows that are continually delivering a calf with a lower price per kilo.
Yeah, and there's 2 aspects to it. So there's the price per kilo, but also then there's the weight of the calf. So those 2 need to be combined. So typically, so you want to actually what you want is the overall price for the weanling at a given age.
So the average daily gain is taken into account there as well.
Yes. Yep.
And I suppose, are the environmental weightings on the new indices having a negative impact on progeny weights? Farmers will often argue that they get paid for weight, so are they not financially better off to chase solely the performance traits?
Rather than including the cost of production traits as well?
Yes, and even the carbon weightings, I suppose, also.
Yeah, the carbon weightings. I mean, I think the reality is we do have carbon targets that we're going to have to meet, and there's going to be financial penalties that are going to come as a result of those if we don't meet them. So I think completely ignoring the carbon piece. as well as the legal piece, I think definitely from what we're hearing, I mean, and this is what just coming back to Teagasc as well, is that the market is actually demanding, and to get those premium prices in the market, they are looking for these more carbon efficient animals. So, and I mean, the other thing I would say, Breifne, is that by and large, producing more carbon efficient animals is also aligning with producing more profitable animals. If you can produce animals that grow faster with less feed, you can have better fertility in our females that require less replacements. It all feeds into a more efficient farming system, a more profitable farming system, but also a more sustainable farming system from an environmental point of view.
Yeah, and then I suppose, Sean, the argument farmers will make to that point is that they've seen costs drop significantly since the November 23 evaluations, and they've seen beef price at present anyways has hit record highs. So I suppose they will argue differently on that point.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the point I was making, I suppose. First of all, the prices that Teagasc put in on the economic model and that we've used in the indexes were not the peak prices back. They weren't peak prices. So actually the costs are reasonably in line with costs as they are today. In terms of the beef price has risen. I mean, one of the things we have to bear in mind is that, as I said, the economic values will be updated this summer, and we have committed to doing that on an ongoing basis. But also it's going to be, well, what is the predicted beef price going to be in 5-6 years' time? That's the key thing, because that's where we're breeding the next generation for. It's not the breeding the price. So if there's a spike in any item today, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's prudent to actually include it in the index.
And I suppose, Sean, in relation to the evaluations themselves, is it the breed societies who they belong to, or is it the farmers and the pedigree producers who own that set of evaluation? So
our view has always been that the all of the data in the ICBF database, the control of that data rests with the individual farmer. So that farmer decides at an individual level who does or does not have access to their data, and that we've been consistent on that for 25 years, and that hasn't changed.
So if, for example, a farmer purchases a bull and a breed society maybe tries to do something that would remove the evaluations completely, the farmer themselves will still have the evaluations for their bull.
Correct. Yeah, so that'll be available in two places. So it's available either on the bull search, on the ICBF animal search, or also it's available on their Herd Plus account.
And that's regardless of what move the societies make?
Yes, I mean, it's up to the breeder themselves to decide what they want to do.
And I suppose there is a preference out there from, we'll say, commercial suckler farmers who are buying bulls into sales. The spring calving breeding season will be coming around the corner soon. I suppose there is a big preference, and do you see that, I suppose, in ICBF for these higher star rating bulls?
Yeah, I would say that that's the case. I mean, that's partly driven by the scheme, but it's also partly driven by the fact that when we look at the performance of 5-star versus 1-star, I mean, if you look at, take the carcass traits, for example, right? The 5-star carcass animals, terminal animals last year, they finished roughly about 50 kilos carcass weights heavier. The offspring from those animals are 50 kilos carcass heavier than the 1-star animals. That's a huge amount of money. It's by the time you begin slightly better quality, better finishing age, you're up at maybe €400 per animal.
And Sean, do you think there's a high level of understanding of the Eurostar indices in the suckler farming community, or could more be done, I suppose, to increase understanding and knowledge of the area?
Undoubtedly, more can be done. I mean, the star ratings, I mean, they can be complex enough, right? In fairness, and there's a huge range of understanding out there among farmers, from farmers that have a really, really detailed understanding to farmers who don't really have an understanding. So that's an ongoing journey, and undoubtedly it's a continued focus for us. We have a lot of work to continue to do there.
And I suppose, do you think the weightings are going to, I suppose, continually cause some level of conflict in the industry? Because some farmers will put a higher weighting on calving difficulty, but other farmers will put maybe a higher weighting on carcass traits. So how do you get a balance there in the overall weightings of the sub-indices?
That comes back to the Teagasc economic model. So Teagasc have a model there for all the input costs, all the output costs, pull them all together and come up with the model. And that's what dictates the economic values. So we are dependent on both the dairy side and on the beef side. We are dependent on Teagasc coming up and using their economic models. Now, those economic models are well validated. And of course, there's always going to be a debate. But that's the reality that they have done those models. I believe those models are robust. It's not to say that there's not going to be an ongoing evolution of those models, but my view is that they're robust.
And then sometimes we hear, I suppose, suckler farmers make the case that the easiest way for them to get to the top end star ratings for their cows is to buy in first cross beef heifers off the dairy herd. Is this the case? And if it's the case, why is that so?
I mean, I think that's not necessarily the case at all. I mean, there's even from the most recent change in the evaluations that happened in November 23, there's actually less first cross from the dairy actually coming in and being eligible as 4 and 5 star animals. And I think in some cases it's a little bit of a, in some ways it's a little bit of a red herring. The percentage of first cross from the dairy in the suckler herd, right back from the mid 2000s, it was around 20%, and that's where it has sat in, all the ways through. And I think at the moment it's sitting at around 20-21%. So the first cross from the dairy as a percentage of the overall national suckler herd hasn't really changed over the years.
And I suppose, Sean, we've seen in recent years that the suckler herd is in decline. Do we envisage that to level out anytime soon? And I suppose what type of cows will we see in the future conventional or commercial suckler herd?
I mean, it's hard to say where the suckler herd is going to finish. I mean, I think there's obviously I think, and this is not necessarily the ICBF area of expertise, but I think there's a couple of things. Obviously, there's an ongoing challenge around profitability. But secondly, I think that there's a real generational renewal issue in the suckler herd. There's a lot of older farmers, and there's not necessarily a younger generation coming along to take over those farms, and that's a real challenge.
Now, moving on, I suppose, to dairy beef, and in relation to the commercial beef value, or the CBV, which we have seen, I suppose, rolled out, and its use has been uptaken more significantly in recent years. But when farmers are purchasing dairy beef calves, how is the CBV delivering for these dairy beef farmers?
I think the key thing is that if you're buying for example, a first cross Angus calf from in the mart or even on farm, and you're looking at 2 calves in a pen, at 3 weeks of age, it's very, very difficult to actually see the difference in those 2 calves and what they will be like 2 years later when they're actually being ready to go for finishing. So what the CBV does is it actually gives that extra bit of information. And we're seeing that in terms of the growth rate, in terms of the carcass quality, in terms of the carcass weight, in terms of the age at finish, that we're seeing very distinct differences. And ultimately, there's a big difference between calves, of different genetic makeup and what they will actually produce down the road. So it's really, really important that information is leveraged to ensure that the dairy beef calf buyer has the best possible chance of making a few euros from that animal.
And I suppose it's also worth noting then that with calving season currently underway on spring calving, dairy and suckler herds, the breeding season is just around the corner too. And for dairy farmers looking to produce high CBV dairy beef calves, we'll say, chasing the best bull in the DBI isn't necessarily going to deliver the highest CBV calf. So what should dairy farmers be looking for to produce calves with a high CBV?
I think if we were to keep it at its most basic, I think the first thing that a dairy farmer needs to do is set his or her tolerance for calving difficulty. And then within that, maximize the beef sub-index within the actual dairy beef index. And I think that's the best way to do it. So every farmer will have their own view as to what's an acceptable calving difficulty, whether that's 2, 3, 4%, whatever the case is. And I think then it's to maximize the dairy beef, the beef sub-index within the dairy beef index after that. I think that the critical point is that we're seeing massive variation for a given level of calving difficulty. And I don't think it's reasonable to think that most dairy farmers are not going to accept, a calving difficulty. So they'll set their tolerance. We are seeing massive variation then in the beef sub-index. And there's a real opportunity there. Maximize the beef sub-index once you have set your tolerance for calving difficulty.
So I suppose it's important to highlight that there is bulls out there with good carcass traits, but relatively low calving difficulty.
Absolutely there is. I mean, and right across the board, both in AI and stock bulls, there absolutely is. And we're seeing that coming through very, very strongly in the data. And dairy farmers are, responding to that also.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for on this week's episode of AgriFocus. Thank you once again to our guest today, ICBF CEO Sean Coughlan, for joining us. We hope you found this podcast informative and interesting. Please rate and review the podcast and do share it with anyone you think might like to listen. Until next time, goodbye and take care.